All right, let's take a closer look at what's at stake now in all of these trade talks around the world. Scott Sheldy is here. He's the principal at the Calguy Group at TJM. He's joining us now from the CME. Tori Whiting, a trade economist at the Heritage Foundation. Great to have you both here.
Good morning.
Good morning. First, Tori, I want to start with you on kind of a little bit of a sticking point with what the president had to say just now that we heard. White House officials are saying that there really aren't any discussions on the books really ongoing with the Europeans. But the president seems to be optimistic, yet there are reports he's supporting 20% tariffs on automobiles into the U.S.
Well, I think that you've seen that the U.S. and the EU have this sort of intention of some sort of trade talks. The EU sees it as non-auto industrial goods, leaving agriculture out. But the U.S. came out with its negotiating objectives, and they actually want to have a full-scale trade agreement with the EU. So I think before you can really see some movement with the U.S. and EU, they need to figure out what they're actually going to be negotiating.
Scott, is this dangerous, though, for the administration? I mean, this is where we were over a year ago, and markets didn't like this process where you had the president going after China, the North Korean negotiations. NAFTA was being blown up at that moment, and that made investors nervous. Does all of this now make you nervous as you watch your markets today?
No, I mean, something will be done. Obviously, something's going to be done with China, and something will ultimately be done with the European Union. But there's a big difference here. I mean, for some reason, it looks as though the Chinese are going to be much more willing to deal than the European Union. And you take Theresa May, for example, and all the difficulties she's had with basically the politics of no. The European Union socialist, regulators are really a big problem as of late. I mean, they make Nancy and Chuck look like they're willing to deal, right? So what's happening in Europe, I think, is going to be a much bigger deal than what's happening in China, even though we're talking about a smaller thing. And ultimately, there will be a deal done. But I think Donald Trump is uniquely placed to know, seeing what Theresa May's gone through about how difficult Europe might be.
Yeah, and to his credit, though, he has had the discussion now going for quite some time, and many in the investment community, Tori, would tell you that the Chinese have been unfair. But what this Reuters report reported overnight, though, was that there's these memorandums of understandings. There's several different ones that are being drafted in negotiations in Washington. And basically, it's cyber theft, it's forced technology transfers, but currency manipulation. I thought that was interesting, Tori, because Stephen Mnuchin, supposedly behind closed doors, is saying you devalued the yuan last year. That is unacceptable, and this is one of the key things that he wants to see changed, or it's no deal.
I mean, I think seeing that these memorandums of understanding are on the table potentially is a positive thing. But we can't forget that what also needs to be on the table is the removal of the tariffs that have been imposed so far. Americans are paying significantly higher prices when they're buying things from China today than they were a year ago, and that cannot stay in place. So while it's great to see the administration really focusing on things like tech transfer and opening up investment, we need to pay attention to reducing and eliminating these taxes in the American people.
But that might be a short-sighted view, Scott. And I say that because these are long-term problems that have been going on for decades. And the other thing, non-tariff barriers. And I think this is crucial. This is American companies that want to do business. Visa, MasterCard, Mnuchin supposedly, according to sources, has brought that up. Subsidies, the excessive regulations and review procedures they put on any American company trying to do business in China. They stop American companies at the border. Doesn't that need to end, Scott?
It's got to end. And this is, other administrations, both Democratic and Republican, have all given lip service to this, but they really have not wanted to upset the status quo. Well, Donald Trump's come in, and as a businessman, he's seen how unfair those practices have been from China for the last 40 years, but not just to the U.S., right, to other big world economies. So what he wants to do, this is going to be his legacy, is he wants to change the way the world trades with China, and there's going to be some, difficult times in the beginning, but at the end, think about this. How well is the world economy going to do if we get China on board and they start to trade freely? That's really going to open things up.
You would see a global stock market rally, I believe, like you do, that would be unprecedented if we get a real deal with China in place, something substantial. We're hopeful at this point. We'll see what happens today. Scott, Tori, thank you very much for getting up earlier. Appreciate it.